Good afternoon, everyone. It's Alan Murabayashi coming at you with another edition of I Love Photography Live. For everyone out there in Twitterland, you can send us comments at #ILovePhoto. Hopefully you're listening to us or watching us on the YouTube station at youtube.com/photoshelter, but you might also be listening to the audio version of this through our iTunes podcast, I Love Photography. Normally I have Sarah Jacobs with us. Sometimes I have Andrew Fingerman with us. Today I have Chris Owyoung with us. He's the product manager of PhotoShelter. Hey Chris, what's up?
Hey Alan, how are you? Hey everybody out there.
Chris, this is your first podcast here.
I think it is. I think it is. I'm usually on the other side of the camera, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, it's good practice. Get on this side of the camera. We have a lot to talk about today. The first thing I wanted to talk about, you've been doing a lot of Fuji instant film portraits, and there's like 3 Fuji instant cameras over there at the office. And in fact, one of them that you hooked up a hot shoe to.
Yeah, I love Fuji Instax. It's I loved Polaroid too when it was available, and I love the Impossible project, and you can do your standard new film with old Polaroid camera that way. But there's something about the Instax that's got that same immediacy and richness of film, and it's awesome, and they're doing some amazing things with it.
So a few months ago, I saw the announcement for this little doodad. This is the Fujifilm Instax SP-1, and it is a wireless photo printer. And the way that it works is you take a photo on your phone. It could be an iOS or Android device. There's an app. Or you can pull a photo that's already on there. And using the software, it connects to this printer, and then you can print photos from your phone. So I got this thing because I, like you, loved kind of the coolness factor of it. It was, it was announced before it was available, so I waited, I don't know, 2 or 3 months for this thing. It got to me. I loaded it up with the app. I printed out a photo, so that photo you saw of some of the PhotoShelter staff here, and then I printed it out on these small little Instax guys, and the initial reaction was, boy, that's cool. That's the initial reaction I had. The second reaction I had was, hey, that's not as saturated as it looks on my screen. It's a little washed out.
It's the Instax film, just like any instant film, had a completely different sort of like tonal range and lowered contrast. And I don't know. I'd be interested. I love the fact that you can just sort of take a digital photo and get the print, a physical object that you can give away, or like I know, when I'm doing Instax for country music or something like that, I'll give the Instax away to one of the country singers, and they'll go, "Oh, this is great, thank you so much," and then they'll sign it and give it away to a fan. And there's that sort of like still that tactile actual object sort of nice things about it, but
cool.
It's not a one-to-one thing with what you see on the screen.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, why wouldn't I just have an instant film camera rather than carrying a wireless printer and the phone? It's cool, but it's also, it connects via Wi-Fi. So if you're already on a Wi-Fi network, you have to select the Fuji printer as the Wi-Fi network. It sets up its own network. So you disable Wi-Fi on your phone for the time that you're printing. But once the unit powers down, it immediately loses that Wi-Fi connection. So then I was thinking, why don't they use Bluetooth? But I'm sure it's sort of a bandwidth thing.
Yeah, until they get like a better, more high bandwidth but still low power wireless, protocol between something, your phone, and a device. I don't see it getting much better than that. Using Wi-Fi for the printing in this case, or like an iFi card, or even from some of the cameras now have Wi-Fi built in that go directly to the phone. It's still a real pain in the butt to get it to actually work. In fact,
so I'm not totally sold.
If it's enough of a pain in the butt that I would actually just rather have a cord that you plug into the phone and to the device and have it work that way.
Yeah.
I'm doing it for like 2 minutes at a time.
I was also joking with someone. It's sort of like, why was I so amused by this when we've had instant cameras since the 70s? It's like all of a sudden it's exactly the same thing. It doesn't look as good on your screen, but I guess it's just that novelty factor. Oh
There's
well.
that in the instant film is expensive. You know,
Yeah.
you can shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot on your mobile phone or your digital camera, and you just pick the best one and then print that one out. I've taken lots of Instax photos at like roughly $1 a piece, and a lot of them are just crap. And if I had been able to take it on my phone and then print it out with this like new device, I might do that actually.
Okay, I buy that. I buy that. All right, on to some photography. Christie's is having a cool auction of stuff, and the cool auction of stuff is limited edition prints from National Geographic. So a lot of our friends who are using PhotoShelter, a lot of names that people will recognize: Vincent Musi, Amy Vitale, Jim Richardson. And I was surprised to see that the prices really aren't that bad. These are actually pretty large scale prints that they're selling. They're not mounted or framed or anything, but you know, for $700 or $800, you can get a pretty large scale print from a National Geographic photographer.
Yeah, and they're small edition too. I think some of them are in the sort of edition range of 10 or 20 per. And for the caliber of work and the fact that these were selected by Elizabeth Christ, I believe, the photos are just fantastic. And I guess it's important to note that this is an online auction, so you don't actually have to go to Christie's here in New York
All right.
and you know, raise your paddle. So the work here is pretty stunning.
Yeah, so this guy, and I think they're mostly the size, it's 24 by 17 and 3/4 inches. Signed in ink, digital chromogenic print. So they're not silver gelatin or anything like that. They're all digital prints, but still. I mean, everybody does digital prints now, so it's not
Yeah,
that different.
these are starting out as digital capture anyway, the majority of these. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe check that out. Christie's has that. Petapixel had a little article on a trends document that iStockPhoto released. And this is something that we, you know, when we did the PhotoShelter collection many years ago, it was a type of research that a lot of people were asking for, but there wasn't a consistent way to get it. So I was really happy to see that iStock is presenting some of this information. For example, as you can see at the top there, in regards to stock photography, transparency and openness. So they want pictures of people at desks that are shot through glass. So literally transparent. But I think it kind of goes through this sort of the openness of how offices are set up nowadays with the light streaming in. That's the thing with stock photography. It just gets dated so quickly with hairstyles and interior decoration and clothing. It's good stuff.
yeah, I love. I think anytime anyone in this space who's an authority comes out with this kind of information, and it's good for the industry and good for photographers. If you make any portion of your income off of stock photography, you're going to be making images like this. I mean, you make images to sell.
You're making a very small portion of your income off of stock photography
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
making it. I like this one too. Hipsters are taking over. Beards, bikes, monochrome clothing, wooden desks, and real coffee are the touchstones of the creative business. It's hipsters in stock photography. It used to be like, hey, let's get like LBGT because that was kind of the thing that we needed, or let's get Hispanics. Now it's hipsters. It's weird how these things change.
Yeah, and it makes me want to grab a camera and go over to Williamsburg.
Yeah, which is, you know, it's weird to be in Williamsburg where like everyone is dressed like a hipster.
Yes. You
I don't know
think
what to make of that.
I don't either, but give me a camera and some model releases. I'll be right there.
Okay, sounds good. That sounds good. The Time Lightbox had this interesting piece on in Paris. So Pierre Terdjman, who's a photojournalist, was frustrated with the lack of coverage of sort of hard news events. So, for example, he just felt like things that are happening in Egypt, in the country of Georgia, and Afghanistan weren't really getting the ink or the pixels that they deserved. So they did this sort of guerrilla campaign where they printed these large-scale prints and just posted them on walls. So it was him and a couple of the photojournalists, kind of inspired by the work of other artists like JR, who we've talked about on the broadcast before. And it was interesting, the quote that he had, which I didn't necessarily agree with. He said, "Photojournalism used to be a transgressive militant act." And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I like the sentiment.
The sentiment's nice, and I sort of agree with you that the taking of pictures wasn't necessarily always. It could be in many cases, but it wasn't always. There's the aspect of documentation and even passivity in there without motivation.
So here's my question. He said it cost him about $40 a piece to print out these large-scale things, and then they kind of go out as volunteers and post these things up. And he said so far, City Hall and the police haven't harassed them. So, you know, and photojournalism has such a strong history in France. Cartier-Bresson and a lot of those guys. So I guess culturally that's kind of cool that that's happening. The question that I have is, in this Twitter world and short attention span world, do even these photos become sort of dated too quickly? Do they kind of lose their relevance if you're posting like, here's an attack that was on Kandahar, and well, that's over now and there's a new conflict brewing somewhere else? Would it be better for him to like post an LCD screen somewhere, LED screen, and flash these things around? And then the other thing that I noticed is, at least in this photo that we're seeing, I didn't see like a QR code or any way to find more about it. And yeah, I think that there's power in being able to like, oh, that's a captivating image. Where can I go to find more information?
Yeah, and I don't know for sure, but I had that same thought where I don't see any sort of caption information or way to find other information. If the point of this is to really literally put images of things going on in other places in the world, uncomfortable images in this case, there's no next step here. I like it for in terms of like social commentary. I like it in terms of art in public places.
Yeah.
And even this image of the silhouetted like person with a machine gun pointed at what looks like a mother and child. Yeah. That's rather arresting, and it really gets the point across. But I think you could go a step further if the point is to really get the word out about these conflicts and news in other areas.
So he's talking about that. So the organization is called Disturb with a Y. He's talking about doing this in the U.S. as well, which is kind of neat. But they kind of want to get their ducks in line and make sure they're talking about crowdfunding potentially for this kind of thing. It's interesting. You know, we see like in Brooklyn, we see photo installations on construction sites, etc. We know that with the Photoville, they have the wall that I was on the jury for this year. So there are a lot of public installations of photography. This one is sort of subversive by nature because they didn't seek any approval, nor did they get any. They just got kind of the approval of the people, I guess. But yeah, it would be great to see kind of the next level of this happen.
Yeah, I think we're definitely at the beginning of that.
There's this crazy video that was going on the internet. And I found this version on Fastco Design, so they have this little animated GIF. But look at this freaking Supercell thunderstorm thing happening, and it's a photographer named Stephen Locke, who's one of the storm chaser guys. And you know, it's the kind of thing you have to kind of be in the Midwest to see this kind of stuff, because it certainly doesn't happen in New York, and it doesn't happen in Hawaii, where I'm from. I don't know if you ever saw it in St. Louis.
You know, I grew up just outside of St. Louis City, and you would see the sky turn green and things like that, but I've never seen anything like this. You have to have like this large expanse of flat, you know, land to get something going. But this is just incredible. I don't know how long Stephen actually stood there and did this time lapse, but the thought of it sort of like going like that, it's like I asked myself, when do you start screaming?
Yeah, it doesn't seem safe. Well, I checked out his website too, tempestgallery.com. And he, like Mitch DeBrowner, who won the Sony World Photography Awards a few years ago, like these guys' images, and Camille Siemens did one, the Iceberg Lady did one, like a series of black and whites as well. Like you just can't believe, first of all, that nature can look like this. And then secondly, that people actually go out and try to take photos of this stuff. Because these suckers are moving fast. It's moving fast. It's going to come at you. Look at that lightning bolt. I don't understand.
Yeah, and these things like destroy entire communities, if not towns. And so there's literally no way you can run away from it. So on the one hand, kudos, but also I sort of fear for Stephen and people who have the guts to go out and do these capture these images.
You know, I've seen like on some of these like Learning Channel or whatever, they have these storm chaser programs and they build these cars that are super weighted down and have just like mini little portholes so people can see out, so no flying branches and stuff can come get them. It's sort of stunning that people actually want to do that, but there you go. So some really cool photography there and cool video that he had there. And then we found this, Nina Roeder, who's a photographer. Where was she from? Austria or something like that? Austria or Germany or something like that. Over on Feature Shoot, 3 generations of women play dress up in Mutter's Schuhe, which means mother's shoe. So Nina Roeder kind of did these. She got the consent of her mother and her grandmother immediately, which surprised her because they're kind of like from the small town, and art and art photography are sort of foreign. But she shot them wearing the same clothes in the same setting, as sort of an exploration of self. And I just like these. And in reading kind of the interview that's going on Feature Shoot, you kind of realize, I don't know if this is unilaterally true, but a lot of cases, like people that are doing art photography have an artist statement that sort of frames the project and talks about what the motivation was and what they're trying to discover out of the process, whereas, you know, you might not get that out of a portrait photographer or a commercial photographer or even a photojournalist. Like when I take a photo, I'm like, I'm just taking a photo. I'm not thinking like, I'm trying to explore some part of myself. But it's just fascinating to me to see kind of these 3 generations, and you know, they're artfully composed photos, and it's kind of looking at the aging process and all kinds of things that I think are relevant. It hit home to me because I'm getting older. I don't know about you. You're still young, Chris.
Relatively speaking. No, I loved this project, especially when I learned that the scenes that Nina is trying to recreate are actually her mother's memories. And so there's this aspect of sort of telephone to it that I really loved, where she's interpreting something her mother actually remembered, and her grandmother might have been there in the house, whether she was in the room or not.
Right.
And I love that each of the images is not exactly the same.
Yeah, I like that too.
So her grandmother is doing one thing. Her mother, who actually experienced this way back when, is maybe doing something of how it actually remember how it was. And then Nina is doing a third thing in these shots. And as triptychs, I think they're really fantastic.
Yeah, you almost kind of wish that the presentation on the website put them side by side. Obviously, you'd kind of run out of screen real estate. But I think that a horizontal triptych would be kind of more interesting in some ways. And I would love to kind of see them large scale on the wall as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think the impact would be better.
Fantastic in person.
Yeah. It's cool. You know, Feature Shoot always has some great stuff. And in a lot of cases, photographers that you're not necessarily familiar with. Man, I got to check out that site more often. I go there like once a month. I should check it out more often.
No, they're fantastic over there.
This, I remember I think it was like in the 1980s when Ted Turner said he's going to start colorizing old black and white classic movies, and people were like, "Oh my God, you can't do that!" And then they colorized them, and they're like, "Oh, okay, well, whatever. I guess that's okay." And for whatever reason, in the past few years, a lot of hobbyists have started going in to sort of classic black and white photos, whether they're in the public domain or not, and have been using very, very artful Photoshop skills to add color to them. And so this particular article first notes History in Pics, which is an Instagram account that we've talked about before, which is notorious for being very inaccurate about explaining a photo, which is a shame because they're also, in many cases, stealing the photo, and they've been called out on that, but they're like, oh, whatever, who's going to sue us? But, if you're going to steal the photo, at least be historic.
At least get it right.
Yeah. So this article, is talking about the problem of having these images be colorized, where the artist who's colorizing them has no idea actually what the original color was. And then these images get sucked into Google Images, and then some high school kid or some researcher comes along, not even realizing that they weren't color images in the first place, and then building some sort of false narrative. And yeah, granted, maybe it's about color and maybe not as substantive as what date it was or some other factual elements about it. But for example, this photo of Steve Jobs, we obviously had color film when Steve Jobs was of this age, which looks like in the 80s, and yet this is a very artfully done photo, but we don't know what color his sweater was, and all of a sudden it's like the truth. It's a little worrisome to me. I don't know if it's like too subtle a thing, but it's a little worrisome that this stuff is now getting sucked in. And I think was it in this post or some other post where they're saying, yeah, they colorized an I Love Lucy episode, and they colored the dress green. The dress was colored green, and everyone was in an uproar because it was kind of an ugly color, and that wasn't the original color. And when they asked Lucille Ball about it, she said, I was just wearing a gray dress because I knew that there was no color. Nobody's going to be able to see it.
No one cares at the time.
Yeah. It's strange. It's a strange phenomenon. I don't know how much it matters. Like, does it really matter, or are we just blowing something up here?
In the grand scheme of things, I think moment to moment, I think it matters very little. But the aspect of this where you can actually get it wrong, and then someone else can interpret that as the truth. That's troubling.
Yeah, because I think that can be extended into a lot of different areas of the digital domain where things get manipulated so easily, and then the information superhighway allows us to put it out so quickly, and misinformation becomes truth, and then people start making weird assertions, and the truthers come out, and the conspiracies come out, and
yeah, at its worst, this is like messing with the historical record at its very worst.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of historical pictures, this was very cool, and I hope not all of these get colorized, but the Metropolitan Museum of Art released 400,000 images online for commercial use. So they are now, I guess it's incorrect to say they're in public domain, but they can be used, kind of like those Getty images, they can be used for non-commercial use. And there's some really cool ones in there, like this one of all these people laying out. And we've seen similar efforts. The New York Public Library did something like this. I think the New York Times put a lot of their historical images online. And I just think it's fascinating to go back through these slices of history. We talk a lot about found photos from broadcast to broadcast. And there's just got to be troves of stuff that people have never seen before. And, I was speaking with Brad Mansion yesterday. He spoke at our Photos and Beer event, which is kind of this private event that we do for PhotoShelter staff and some good friends of ours. And he was over at my house, and he said, I went to Sports Illustrated to talk to some of those guys the other day, and you know they have in New Jersey, like in a cave, all of the historical images shot on film. And obviously, you know, you'll go to a game, and even in the film days, you might have shot 30 rolls of stuff, only to have maybe 4 images appear in the magazine. And he said the only time that they go into that cave to do any research, I don't know if it's literally a cave, but let's pretend it is. Only time they go into the cave is when like somebody dies. And they said the cataloging is actually pretty well done. But because it's all film and because there's literally thousands, if not millions of frames, that stuff is never going to be digitized and no one's ever going to see it. And we know that's true with the Corpus Bettman archive as well that they acquired. And my counterpoint to that was even in the digital age, a lot of the digital photos will never be seen because there's just too many digital photos. Like I shot 60,000 photos last year. I probably posted like 1,000 of them on Facebook, which is the only place where I post photos. So there's, you know, it's always going to be like this discovery problem and searchability problem. But you know, at least we get some of these cool photos from the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yeah, and they're really high quality. I mean, they're of a level of detail that even if you were standing in front of the work of art at the museum, you might not be able to get close enough because of the, you know, the velvet rope or the sensor or the glass to actually see the level of detail that's present in some of these imagery, some of the images.
I didn't actually check out the site yet to see how large the files are, but it would be interesting to see if they're large enough that you could make a print for your home.
They are. In some cases, they're in the upwards of 12 megapixel range, which is larger than life size when you're talking about some of the smaller items, whether it be like golds, sort of like finials from Greece or something like that. Really a fantastic amount of detail.
Yeah.
And images that would be extremely hard to get in, you know, just days ago. You'd have to actually have access to the Met's archive to do this. And now it's just all there for everyone to see. So it's really like a finding buried treasure in many cases.
And then here we have a historically colored photo after we talked about the veracity problem. I guess they did this back in the day, so I guess maybe it's a little more authentic and a little more real. Yeah, this is a funny photo too. Group of 13 decapitated soldiers from 1910. There's that site Shortby that has a lot of the public domain images that were shot by the U.S. government back during the wars, where you can buy prints and whatnot. So this is cool to see kind of that same stuff. It's just cool to see. And you know, a lot of times they were using view cameras and just the way that the images look because of the larger format and the lenses. I just think it's really, really interesting stuff. Action camera maker GoPro files for the $100 million IPO. So they made like $900 million in revenue last year, which is sort of staggering. But everybody seems to have a GoPro now, whether they're into action sports or not. Like I see people, you know, when I've been traveling, people that just carry the GoPro on a stick to do selfies. It's weird.
Yeah, every musician or DJ or you know, artist I know has one of these things. They're extremely high quality and the price point's right, and there's this like weird aspect of self-surveillance or self-documentation that they enable. That's pretty amazing.
What I love about the story is just the how the guy got started. It's just wild. He was trying to figure out how an amateur could get cool footage when they didn't have access, and thus the name GoPro, like an amateur would go pro. And he started with a film, but then he switched to digital, and like he was like living out of a van. It's just like it's almost like a rags to riches story. But he traveled to Asia and he found like this really simple mechanism, and he built these. And even today, the cameras, they have no zoom. It's 170-degree field of view. It's like there are almost no controls on the thing. So it was almost like an antithesis to all of the digital cameras that were available at the time that had all the dials and this focusing, 12 different focusing styles. And now the dude's a billionaire. They said it's calculated at $1.2 billion he's worth, that guy. And his dad was an early investor. His dad put in like $100,000 to help fund the thing. And his dad owns like 6% of the company. So the dad, I'm sure, is going to be very wealthy when this happens as well. But it's just, yeah, you just can't. And the other thing about GoPro is that really, you know, I've heard ruminations about them wanting to start like a TV network or some sort of media property that rivals YouTube and or Red Bull. So in the same way that Red Bull built this, it's not just about the sports drink, it's about the lifestyle. Everybody wants to be the lifestyle brand. So similarly, GoPro, because everybody's generating this footage, and some of the footage off that newest camera that came out like a year ago is like stunning.
There was a guy, I went to Antarctica in January, and there was a guy, you know, just your normal average dude who had gotten the new GoPro, and he had it on a waterproof housing for it and a stick, and he was holding it under the water as we would go by these gigantic icebergs. And 80% of the iceberg is underwater. So the little piece you're looking at the top. And the footage he was playing back on his laptop was absolutely stunning. And this is from a device that cost, you know, a couple $100, and and it just has one setting, on, you know, and it was really, really, really amazing. It was the level of quality that I sort of remember, you know, on Nova, when I was seeing on Nova when I was younger. And he's just like, whatever, doing it himself off the side of the boat with a stick.
You know, and it's not like there aren't competitors in the space, because Sony came out with like the Action Cam. A lot of people have tried to replicate it, but for whatever reason, I mean, maybe it's sort of first mover's advantage, but there's like a coolness factor also with the brand that I think is interesting. The one thing that I read about the IPO, though, so they're raising $100 million, which to me sounds like they should be raising more. If you're going to IPO, why just raise $100 million? They apparently have $111 million of debt that they're hoping to pay off with the IPO. Their net revenue was like $60 million last year, so I guess $100 million plus that additional $11 million that they need to cover the debt is fine. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the future. But GoPro, you know, I've certainly enjoyed footage from those cameras over the years. Nikon, we both shoot Nikon, Chris, and they came out recently with their new version of the 400mm f2.8 FL ED VR image. And I was looking at some of these samples. So these are 100% crops that we're looking at. And I went to the site to see, so this image here, that little face right there, turns into this little face here. And it is sharp. That is sharp. So, and that's at ISO 500 on a D4S. So it's not like 100 ISO. So that thing is sharp. But here's my only question. The lens is $12,000. The previous version of this lens was $9,000. So it's gone up 33% in price. Why? I don't understand. Explain this to me. And who's going to buy the thing?
I would love to know the actual total number of individual units that Nikon moves of these, or Canon.
Yeah, Canon has the same price point.
For that matter, because basically you're just talking about agencies. I know a few photographers freelance who own, you know, the previous model or the model before that. But I don't know any individual consumers who are running out to drop $12,000 on a prime lens.
Yeah, and I think the argument has been in the past couple of years, because the ISO sensitivity of the cameras have gotten so good, it's sort of like, do you really need f2.8? Can you get by with f4? certainly the depth of field and the bokeh is going to be different. Totally understand that. But an f4 lens, a 400 millimeter f4, I don't know who manufactures that, but I know there are like zooms that are in that range, is going to be a lot cheaper than $12,000.
And arguably, you know, in some ways a lot more useful to the individual photographer. Nikon's 200-400 f4 is a fantastic lens. And it's smaller than the 400, it's lighter than the 400. And if you're shooting with one of those top-level cameras, you can crank the ISO up to compensate for the loss of light on the f-stop. And the image quality is stunning. No one ever looks at a fantastic picture and just, oh, it's just too noisy. You know, is it a great image or is it not? So
you know, we did that webinar with our friends over at LensPro to go about buy or rent, and I can't imagine the calculus of where you buy this lens.
Well, I mean if I need to use one of these lenses, if I'm shooting like a stadium show or a concert or something, I often have to go out and get one of these lenses, and I will just dial up LensPro to go using the app on my iPhone, order the lens, and it just arrives. And then I've shelled out, you know, maybe like $150 instead of $12,000 for a lens that I'll use, what, you know, less than 10 times a year, ever.
Yeah, but even if you're shooting every single football, let's say you shoot 16 NFL games a year, and you're shooting 16 college games the day before, so you're using the lens 32 times, and you're going to pay $12,000. Even amortized across 3 years, it's still like enormous chunk of change per use. Anyway, I'm not here to bitch about the pricing, because the pricing is what it is. I just don't understand, like, did we really need a new version of the lens 33% more expensive? Just buy the old lens, you know. It's sharp, but you know my theory about sushi, which is sort of the diminishing returns. You know, it's like, how much better does sushi taste for $1,000 than it does at $100? And you know, price comes in at some point. Oh God, it's funny. Over on Wired, there's this guy who's shooting bird's eye views of yachts and freighters. Laurent Maes is his name, and he won't tell anybody how he's actually shooting it. So he goes and he sells these photos to people, and in a lot of cases they can't even figure out how he shot the photo. I don't know whether it's a drone or clearly, I mean, these boats are moving, so he can't be stitching them together, could he? I don't know if it's like satellite or spy plane or something. But it's cool because he's getting a really, really high level of detail, and some of these yachts are like crazy. You know, I was in Monaco a few weeks ago, and they were setting up for the Formula 1, and you know, there's a big harbor area, and you wouldn't believe how big some of these boats were that were coming into the. It must have been like Paul Allen's, one of his mega yachts that was coming into the.
I mean, we're talking about several hundred feet.
Oh God, and you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollar boats. And I guess if you're gonna have a boat like that, you probably want a nice picture of it. So Laurent goes in there with his drone, not drone, whatever it is, and he takes a nice photo that you can zoom in, and yeah. So it says he prints them up to 10 feet across for people. So I don't know whether he's selling it to the boat owner whose walls within the boat are so big that they can put a 10-foot print of the boat on the boat. Because, you know, I guess not every boat has the helicopter pad, so you're not going to know what the boat looks like from above. So there you go. You get the 10-foot print.
You've got your 400-foot yacht, and you know, you've got a house, probably, hopefully, you know, to match, and you want to say to your house guests, you know, you want to come see my boat, and then it's one of Laurent's prints instead of the actual thing.
It's wacky. All of these links, by the way, are available on our blog in case you want to follow along and read more detail on them, as they are every week at blog.photoshelter.com. We got two things more for you. One is over on the Lens blog, and it's the title is Cocooning in Hong Kong. And the photographer's name is Pierre Steinhauer. And initially, you know, when I saw this initial photo and I saw the name, I thought it was like insects or something. What it is buildings being covered for safety reasons in various materials. But in a lot of parts of Asia, and Hong Kong is no different, they use bamboo as scaffolding.
Alan, we just lost the screen share there, yeah.
Ah, because I blew it up, and then let's try this again.
There we go.
So they look very abstract when they're close up, but then when you pull back, you see kind of these ginormous cocoons of fabric over these bamboo skeletons, and they're just really cool photo. I've always enjoyed like building architecture photography for some reason, particularly when the lines are straight, like no keystoning, anything like that. You know, either use your large format camera or your tilt shift lens to get the lines straight or whatever, and the photos can look really, really great. And here's like he dragged the shutter on this, so you see all the headlights moving, and even the cranes are moving up top. And it's a really, really like good-looking project. I don't know. What did you think of these?
I thought they were fantastic. I mean, this is like another example where people will just sort of walk or drive by these things. I mean, they're everywhere in the modern world, or even in the natural world, though, things that we just don't really notice. And then it takes someone from somewhere else to say, huh, that's really neat, and then also want to spend an inordinate amount of time documenting it. It's this sort of like interplay of like the macro and micro on this huge like cityscape level, and the images themselves are fantastic, but there's also hats off to Peter for basically taking something from completely mundane and turning it into the sublime through his own vision. I particularly like the night images where everything's sort of like lit up in that sodium green blue haze.
And he definitely waited for the light, because there's nothing like in bright broad daylight where the contrast would be like, oh, too much. You know, it's always like these sort of overcasty photos, which I think helps pop the color a little bit more, or it's those kind of dusk dawn images or night images. I like this one because the little McDonald's sign is sticking out on the right, but it's only one arch or 1.5 arch that you get there. McDonald's is bad for you. You shouldn't eat it anyway. That's all I'm saying about McDonald's. The last thing we have is this stuff gets put on the viral Facebook and whatnot, but I like this. You know, we always try to end on like a fun note, and this is the mini style hacker. And so this kid's parents thought it would be fun to like take like a magazine ad or like an editorial shoot from a magazine, and then put their 4-year-old kid in kind of the same outfit in a similar pose. And I think it's hilarious. Because the kid is like, they're saying he's not an actor, he's not a model, but the kid obviously has enough presence and self-awareness and can obviously like look at a photo and take direction and recreate the pose. And in a lot of cases, the clothes match pretty well. I wouldn't say the photos are the best thing in the world. It looks a little cell phony photo and maybe a little bit heavy-handed on like the Instagram filter or something. But it's a fun series, and they've been doing it, well, I guess they've been doing it for 4 months. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not like a super long-term project.
No, I mean, at some point, this kid's either going to go pro or he's going to go, oh, Mom, not again. And I think that day will come pretty soon. But they're fun, and he's clearly having fun while doing it.
Yeah.
Which I think is hilarious.
Like this one I like. You know, kids in sunglasses always crack me up too, because why are they wearing sunglasses? But here he is, kind of with the pose, and things are matching. Things are matching.
And there's a significant amount of effort that goes into them like finding the clothing at like Gap or Old Navy or whatever it might be, to actually match what the designer had in the first place.
So, you know, a lot of parents are out there doing these types of projects. And we've seen like all the dads who have always, you know, in the past 2 years have gotten their kids out and done these things. Or there was the mom with the sleeping baby that would make like use sheets to turn them into a landscape. In those cases, those people were at least part-time photographers. This woman is not a photographer. Clearly, she's not a photographer by the quality of her images. I always wonder, like, what the end game is. Like, are they trying to make the kid a model? Are they trying to get like advertising contract? You know, we talked about Menswear Dog 2 weeks ago, and those guys got to quit their jobs because Menswear Dog got so popular. But
oh, I did not know that part.
Oh yeah, but they were like really good photos.
No, yeah.
So I don't know what the deal is with Mini Style Hacker Guy here, but I enjoyed the photos for the 4 months that they've been up, and I guess all the power to the kid and to the family, and I hope something good comes of it. Maybe we'll pay for his college.
We'll see him on Ellen or something, and then do a little bit.
So hey, Chris, that was fun. You should come back another. Maybe you know what we need to do? We need to do like the super group. I Love Photography Live with you, Andrew, Sarah, and me one day. And everybody will just have to get their word in really, really quickly.
Will there be a buzzer? I'll be there if there'll be a buzzer.
Yeah, you can buzz. The BS meter can come on whenever. But this is very helpful because Andrew was supposed to be here today, and then he had to take his wife to the doctor. So you stepped in at sort of the last moment. So I appreciate you coming out and helping us this week.
Anytime. It's been fun.
So for Chris Owyoung, this is Alan Murabayashi signing off with another I Love Photography Live. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.